I handed him the document. He snatched it from my hand and read it quickly, his face changing from pale to red. "This doesn't mean anything," he said. "It does, and it means you have no claim to this company." Blake crumpled the paper and threw it on the floor. "You think you can run this place, you don't know the first thing about construction." "I'll learn." "You'll fail," he spat. "And when you do, don't come crawling to me." I bent down and picked up the crumpled document, smoothing it out. "I'm not going to fail, and you're not going to be around to watch." Blake stepped closer, his breath hot on my face. "What's that supposed to mean?" I held up the folder again. "It means I'm giving you a choice. You can walk away quietly, or I can take this to the police." His jaw clenched. "You're bluffing." "Try me." Blake stared at me for a long moment. I could see his mind working, calculating. Then he laughed, cold and sharp. "You're just like your dad, stubborn, stupid." I didn't react. He grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair. "Fine, keep your little company, but don't call me when it all falls apart." He walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. "You'll regret this." "I already regret trusting you," I said. Blake slammed the door on his way out. The office fell silent. I stood there for a moment, breathing hard, my hands still gripping the folder. Then I sat down at the desk, my father's desk, and let out a long breath. The first battle was over, but I knew Blake wouldn't give up that easily. I opened the folder again and started making copies of everything. If he wanted to fight, I'd be ready. Over the next few days, I started going through the company's accounts. Dad had been meticulous about some things and careless about others. I found old contracts, unpaid invoices, and a list of employees I'd never met. I called a lawyer, someone my father had worked with before. His name was Mr. Torres. He was calm and professional, the kind of man who didn't waste words. I showed him the folder. He read through it carefully, making notes. "This is solid," he said. "Your uncle committed fraud. Multiple counts. Can we prosecute?" Mr. Torres looked at me over his glasses. "We can, but it'll be messy. Family cases always are, and it'll take time." I nodded. "What about a restraining order? Can I keep him away from the business?" "Easily. With this evidence we can file tomorrow." That gave me some relief, but I still felt uneasy. Blake was unpredictable and angry. 2 weeks later, Blake showed up at my house. I was in the garage sorting through old tools when I heard the door open. I turned and saw him standing there, arms crossed. "You had me served with a restraining order," he said, his voice tight. "You're not supposed to be here," I replied. "That order says you can't come within 200 feet of the business or my home." Blake laughed. "You really think a piece of paper is going to stop me? It's not just paper, it's the law." He stepped closer. "You're making a big mistake, Kyle." I picked up a wrench from the workbench, not as a threat, just to have something in my hand. "You already made the mistake, I'm just fixing it." Blake's face twisted. "Your dad would be ashamed of you." That hit harder than I expected. I felt anger rising in my chest. "Don't talk about him. You stole from him while he was dying." Blake shook his head slowly. "You don't get it, do you? I kept this business alive. Your dad was too proud to ask for help. I stepped in. You stepped in and stole $200,000. "I earned that money," Blake shouted. "I worked just as hard as he did, more even." I set the wrench down carefully. "If that were true, you wouldn't have hidden it." Blake's hands curled into fists. "You're going to regret this." "You already said that." He took a step back, his face red. "I'm not done with you." "Yes, you are," I said. "And if you come near me or the business again, I'll have you arrested." Blake stared at me for a long moment. Then he turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. I stood there, my heart pounding. My phone was already in my hand. I called Mr. Torres and told him what happened. "I'll file a report," he said. "He violated the order, that's serious." The next morning I went to the office early. I'd spent the weekend organizing everything, creating a clear system for the accounts. I hired a new bookkeeper, someone my father had worked with years ago. Her name was Patricia. She was older, sharp, and didn't take nonsense from anyone. "Your dad was a good man," she told me. "Blake's always been trouble." "Did you know he was stealing?" She nodded. "I suspected, but your dad never talked about it. I think he was embarrassed." That made sense. Dad hated conflict, especially with family. Patricia helped me set up new accounts, change passwords, and lock Blake out of everything. By the end of the week, the business was secure, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Blake wasn't finished. Then one afternoon, I got a call from Mr. Torres. "We have a problem," he said. My stomach dropped. "What kind of problem?" Blake filed a lawsuit. "He's claiming the business is rightfully his." I drove to Mr. Torres' office immediately. He had the lawsuit laid out on his desk. I read through it, my hands shaking. Blake was claiming that my father had promised him the business years ago. He said the contract I had was forged. He even had a witness, someone I'd never heard of. "This is insane," I said. "He's lying," Mr. Torres nodded. I know, but we have to take it seriously. We'll need to go to court. How long will that take? Months, maybe a year. I felt exhausted suddenly. I just want this to be over. Mr. Torres looked at me sympathetically. I know, but you have the evidence. We'll win. I left his office feeling drained. Blake wasn't just greedy, he was desperate, and desperate people were dangerous. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my father, about all the hours he'd worked, all the sacrifices he'd made, and Blake wanted to take it all. The court date was set for 3 months later. In the meantime, I focused on running the business. It was harder than I expected. There were problems every day, equipment breaking down, workers calling in sick, clients asking for updates. But slowly I started to understand how everything worked. Patricia helped me learn the systems. The crew foreman, a man named Orlando, taught me about the jobs. I spent mornings in the office and afternoons on construction sites learning. People respected me because I was my father's son, but I wanted them to respect me for my own work. One afternoon, Orlando pulled me aside. "You're doing good, kid," he said. "Your dad would be proud." That meant more to me than anything Blake had ever said. But in the back of my mind, I knew the lawsuit was coming, and I had to be ready. When the court date finally arrived, I wore my best suit. Mr. Torres met me outside the courthouse. "Remember," he said, "stay calm, answer the questions honestly, don't let Blake get under your skin." I nodded. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than I expected. Blake sat on the other side with his lawyer, a slick man in an expensive suit. Blake didn't look at me. The judge entered and we all stood. The hearing began with Blake's lawyer presenting his case. He claimed that my father and Blake had been equal partners for years. He said the contract I had was fake, created after my father's death. Then he called his witness, a man named Mr. Vance. I didn't recognize him. Mr. Vance testified that he'd heard my father and Blake discussing their partnership at a bar years ago. It sounded rehearsed. When it was our turn, Mr. Torres presented the folder. He walked the judge through every document, every email, every bank statement. Mr. Torres called Patricia to the stand. She testified that she'd worked for my father for over 10 years. She confirmed that Blake was never a partner, only an occasional contractor. "Did Kyle's father ever mention giving the business to Blake?" Mr. Torres asked. "Never," Patricia said firmly. "He always talked about leaving it to Kyle." Blake's lawyer tried to discredit her, but she didn't budge. Then Mr. Torres called me. I walked to the stand, my hands sweating. Mr. Torres asked me about the folder, about my father's illness, about Blake's behavior at the funeral. I answered every question carefully, honestly. Blake's lawyer cross-examined me. He tried to make me sound young and inexperienced, like I didn't understand business, but I stayed calm. When he asked if I hated my uncle, I paused. "No," I said. "I'm just disappointed." The judge asked to see the original documents. Mr. Torres handed them over. Blake's lawyer objected, but the judge overruled him. After 2 hours, the judge called for a recess. Mr. Torres and I sat in the hallway. "You did great," he said. I didn't feel great. I felt exhausted. When we returned, the judge looked serious. "I've reviewed the evidence," he said, "and I find the plaintiff's claims unconvincing. The documents presented by the defense are clear and credible. The business belongs to Kyle Morrison." Wait, I froze. That wasn't my last name. Mr. Torres touched my arm and whispered. He misspoke. "It's fine." The judge continued. "Mr. Blake Morrison is ordered to cease all claims to the business and to repay the sum of $200,000 plus interest." Blake's face went white. His lawyer started to object, but the judge banged his gavel. "This case is closed." I sat there, stunned. It was over. Blake stood up and walked out without looking at me. I felt relief wash over me like a wave. Outside the courthouse, Mr. Torres shook my hand. "Congratulations, you won." I nodded, still processing. "What happens now?" "Blake has 30 days to appeal, but with this evidence he won't win." I thanked him and walked to my car. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Patricia. "How'd it go?" I typed back. "We won." She sent back a thumbs-up emoji. I drove to the office and sat in the parking lot for a moment. My father's name was still on the sign. I thought about changing it, adding my own name, but not yet. First, I had to make sure the business survived. Over the next few weeks, I worked harder than I ever had. I learned every part of the company, from payroll to permits. Blake never appealed. He disappeared and I heard he moved to another state. I didn't care. He was gone and that was enough. 6 months later, the business was thriving. We landed 2 major contracts and hired 3 new workers. Patricia threw a small party at the office to celebrate. Orlando brought his famous barbecue. People laughed and talked, and for the first time in a long time I felt like I belonged. That night I went home and sat in my father's office. The folder was still in the desk drawer. I pulled it out and read the letter again. Don't let him take what we built. I smiled. I hadn't. I'd protected what my father worked for, and I'd built something of my own in the process. I thought about Blake sometimes, about the anger in his eyes, the lies he told. But mostly I thought about my father, about the lessons he taught me even after he was gone: integrity, honesty, hard work. Those were worth more than any amount of money. I closed the folder and put it back in the drawer. A year after the funeral, I stood in the same funeral home. This time I was there for a friend's father. The smell of lilies brought everything back. But this time I didn't feel lost. I felt strong. I'd learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about trust, respect, and showing up when it matters. Blake had shown me what not to be, and my father had shown me what to strive for. As I left the funeral home, I thought about the folder, about the choice my father made to document everything. He trusted me to finish what he started, and I had. The business was mine now, truly mine, not because of a piece of paper, but because I'd earned it, I'd fought for it, I'd protected it, and I'd never let anyone take it away. That night I added my name to the sign outside the office. It read, Morrison and Son Construction, my father's legacy, and mine. The story you have just heard is a powerful American tale I heard long ago. I'm sharing it to awaken your minds to justice, integrity, and the courage it takes to stand up for what's right, even when it's family. If you were Kyle, would you have stayed silent to keep the peace, or would you have fought for the truth your father left behind? Would you choose comfort, or would you honor the legacy built through sweat and sacrifice? I want to know your opinion, because every story is like a mirror that shows us who we are and who we can become. God bless you, and may truth guide your steps. Meanwhile, on the final screen, I am leaving you with one of the channel's most beloved stories. I am sure it will move you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment. Thanks for watching my video.